Good evening and welcome to our program about the theatrical musical To Paint the Earth and its depiction of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. My name is Thorin Tritter. I am the Museum and Programming Director at the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center, which is located in Glen Cove, New York. I'm really excited about our program this evening, but before I introduce our speakers and talk more about this evening's schedule, I want to thank our co-sponsors. Our sister organizations, the Harriet and Kenneth Kupferberg Holocaust Center, located at Queensborough Community College, and the Holocaust and Human Rights Education Center, located in White Plains, both of whom joined the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center of Nassau County to bring this program to fruition. You know, all too often, our various Holocaust centers in the area are, by necessity, focused on our own activities and programs, but I am very grateful for the collegiality of Laura Cohen at the Kupferberg Center and Millie Jaspers in White Plains, and delighted to work with both of them on this program. Let me also take a moment to put in an advertisement for some other virtual programs that the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center is putting on this week. This coming Tuesday, I hope you will join us for a virtual panel discussion with 3 former college students about the state of anti-Semitism on college campuses today, and importantly, things that students facing anti-Semitism can do to make a difference at their university and can change the culture at a university. Later this week, on Thursday, we will mark Cambodia's National Day of Remembrance to honor the victims of the Cambodian genocide, with a program with 2 professors from Yale University who are going to draw on a new book that they've just published on political violence in Southeast Asia. They're going to talk about the events that took place in Cambodia, describing them in the context of both the Holocaust and other atrocities in Southeast Asia. And they'll also talk about the collective memory of genocides. So I hope you'll be interested by that. And one more to mention: next Sunday, May 23rd at 3 p.m., the Holocaust Memorial and Tolerance Center is partnering with the National Holocaust Museum in Amsterdam for a virtual showing of a documentary about the hidden child survivor Leo Ullman. After the film screening, Mr. Ullman will moderate his own virtual discussion with some of the descendants of some of the families that helped save him and his parents in Holland during the Holocaust. As always, you can find information about all these programs and the full schedule of HMTC's virtual programming on our website at www.hmtcli.org and click on the Events tab. I also will ask you to click on that website and then click on the Give Now button to make a donation to support virtual programs like this. Okay, enough advertising. Let me take that off. Let me talk about tonight's program. Over the past month, HMTC and many other Holocaust centers around the country have been holding programs about the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which was launched on April 19th, 1943, and held out against the Nazis in a series of David and versus Goliath battles for almost a month. On May 16th, 1943, 78 years ago today, the Nazis finally claimed victory over the uprising, although pockets of fighting continued in the following weeks. HMTC and our co-sponsoring organizations wanted to use this anniversary tonight to draw attention one more time to highlight the largest uprising by Jews against the Nazis during World War II. However, instead of presenting a lecture or photographs or a film tonight, we're teaming up with the Richard Rodgers Award-winning musical To Paint the Earth, which debuted at the New York Musical Theater Festival a few years ago and has had several other runs, including at the Southwark Playhouse in London, but is looking forward with some additional financing and backing to appear on Broadway for the 80th anniversary in 2023. As you'll hear, To Paint the Earth tells the story through a musical production of the Jewish underground in the Warsaw Ghetto and their ultimate decision to fight back. We hope that this more artistic look at the events in 1943 will provide more of an understanding not just of the events and dates, but of the feelings and motivations of the Jews who fought back. We have with us this evening the show's 2 writers and composers, Daniel F. Levin and Jonathan Portera, and one of the producers and lead actresses, Lauren Lebowitz. Rather than having me explain their full bios, I am going to put into the chat, which I just did, a link that can take you to a program with the information about their backgrounds. I hope that you'll take an opportunity to read that. At this point, I want to invite Daniel and Jonathan to our virtual stage to explain more about the show and their goal of telling this powerful history through a musical. So I'll ask them to turn on their cameras. And just to give you a bit more information about our program tonight, after Jonathan and Daniel describe the show, Lauren Lebowitz will be performing one of the key songs entitled The Sewing Song. Then we'll be showing an interview with a ghetto fighter survivor and airing a performance of the show's finale, a song called We Rise, before having a Q&A with Daniel, Jonathan, and Lauren. So I invite you to write, if you find questions, write them in the Q&A box. The Q&A function of Zoom should be available by scrolling around on the bottom or top on the screen. If you write your questions, then we'll make sure to get a chance for Jonathan, Daniel, and Lauren to answer those questions at the end of our program. Okay, with that lay of the land, I turn the stage over to Jonathan and Daniel to lead us into tonight's program. Gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Lauren.
Hello. And thank you to HMTC and our partnering organizations. Jonathan and Lauren and I are really grateful that we get to share the newest things that are happening with To Paint the Earth and talk a little bit about what went into making it. So for Jonathan and me, we just wanted to kind of introduce our story. We met at the NYU Tisch Graduate Musical Theater Writing Program, where you go to learn how to write musicals. And we were crazy enough to do this program. And the first year, they pair you up and you write some 10-minute musicals that were supposed to be based on a fable. And Jonathan and I wrote a short piece called The Hungry Lion that we liked quite a bit. Is it hard to hear me? I just saw someone said. Anyway, I'll try to speak a little louder. We wrote a piece called The Hungry Lion. And the second, and we enjoyed it. And then the second year, they pair you up to write a thesis musical. So instead of writing a graduate thesis paper, you write your show. And Jonathan and I were paired together. As I recall, we were not each other's first choice, but we were very happy to land with each other. Okay, I need to turn up the volume on my device, Thorne.
That was
No, you don't. You're good.
Oh, okay, sorry. So we also realized that we hadn't, broken it, we hadn't killed each other writing this 10-minute musical. We could do this, but we had no idea what to write for our full-length show.
So Daniel actually came up with a few ideas and limited them down to two, and it was either Il Duomo or the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and I definitely wasn't going to write Il Duomo, but I had actually never heard of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and I found that very interesting, especially when I found out what it was, and once I discovered it was a story of actual, of the fighting back, of what you do in a situation where you know what's ahead of you. You have all these things taken away from you, but yet you have this will to fight. We both thought it was a very important story to tell. The professors thought we would have some problems, and it's true. It's a very difficult story. How do you present the life of these people while respecting all the horrors that they went through? But they knew exactly what they were walking into, and it didn't matter to them. And they were still going to fight. And then 9/11 happened, and I know for me, if I wasn't convinced before then, I was definitely convinced after that.
Right. I do want to say, so picking up on Jonathan, Il Duomo, by the way, it was going to be about the dome that Brunelleschi designed in Florence. So I ended up writing it for my third graders a couple years later, so it did happen. But I was glad that Jonathan and I settled on the Warsaw Ghetto and the Jewish underground and the uprising. It was a story that I knew very well. I learned in Hebrew school and remember just not being able to believe that these group of kids, I didn't think of them as kids then, but now I think of them as kids, and they were untrained, and they, I remember learning that they held off the German army, and Germans ended up having to bring in the Air Force, and they held them off, for longer than countries had at the time. As Thorin said, technically with the destruction of the synagogue, they call today the end of the uprising, but it kept continuing. And I hadn't thought of it as a musical, I think, until I met with Jonathan, and we started on this process. And I think a lot of the journey in talking with our professors at NYU, this show really wasn't about the fighting and the uprising itself, which is the more famous story, but about everything that led up to that and went into that. I think Robert Lee, one of our professors at Tisch, was one of the first people to say these daily acts of resistance. And Jonathan mentioned 9/11. That was something people were talking about just every day. What did you do to kind of keep going and not panic, and not, even if you were panicked on the outside, on the inside, not show that? How do you keep your kids moving? As an example, one of the things I discovered all kinds of jokes when I was doing research, and I just thought that was such a great example of a Jewish weapon. And anyone, if you've seen Fiddler, and we know that Jews use humor. But I would read, when I was reading Ringelblum's diaries about these, he would capture jokes that were floating around the ghetto, and I won't say them now. Some of them are really nasty. They weren't funny. They were very barbed. They were angry, but they were jokes. And that's sort of one of those examples of these daily things, falling in love, teasing, doing chores. These were like the daily things. And I think for Lauren, Jonathan, and I, that more and more that became what this piece was about. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the research. I mentioned Ringelblum's diaries. Jonathan used the term, we read the canon of the memoirs, the literature. Yitzhak Zuckerman's A Surplus of Memory made a big impact. Israel Gutman, Ringelblum I mentioned, and just a whole other series of memoirs. But things really came to life for me. I'm from the DC area, and I was going back to DC, and a friend of our family's, Gail Schwartz, was a docent at the museum, and I said to Gail this project that we were working on, and did she have testimonies that I could watch about survivors of the Warsaw Ghetto? And she said, you have to watch Vladka Mead. And when I was talking with Thorin, I think she's someone that people at HMTC, you kind of have talked about and know about. She wrote a book called On Both Sides of the Wall that I would read later. But in listening to her testimony, I just was floored. She was 16 at the time, and she was a courier for the Jewish underground. She looked Polish. She had light features, light eyes, blonde hair. And when she went on the other side of the wall with her work detail, she could kind of vanish into Warsaw and was running maps from different leaders of the underground and smuggling in gasoline to use for homemade weapons. Michael Struss, who we're going to see in the video at the end and is one of our big featured people today, was also a smuggler, and we heard his amazing stories. But the first story about it that I had heard was Vladka Mead, and that story became a central kind of current in the show about a 16-year-old girl who, and also watching Vladka as an adult and as a woman talking about her 16-year-old self and saying she didn't do anything extraordinary. And of course, you'll hear Michael say the same thing, and I think we've all heard that this wasn't anything that they thought they were doing that was heroic. This was, you adapted, you got by, you helped your family, you got involved with the youth groups that you had maybe been involved with before the war, and how do you start figuring out, is there a way to resist? And what was that? And as I've been saying, resistance was different for different people. And it was different if you were an adult and a mother and you had children. You had to think of them before you resisted. So it's just incredibly complex, the arguments and the tension that would go on about resisting versus trying to keep your head down and keep going. And I think some of that's going to be I hope, in the first song that we wanted to share with you. So one of the things that stuck with me that Vladka said was that her mother wanted her and her sister to know how to sew. And she thought that if you knew a trade and that you were valuable. and that plays out in various ways in real life, of course, in the show. You know, was that enough to be a worker and to be of value? We're going to learn about how, well, we didn't include all of this, but Michael Struss worked for the Hermann Brauer factory, refurbishing German supplies. So he was useful in that sense. So I was struck that Vladka said at the time she thought this was why did she need to know how to sew? She was doing other things. She was involved with her youth movements. And so that kind of led into the song called The Sewing Song. So Jonathan, do we want to say, we have Lauren Lebowitz, who was mentioned by Thorin. She's going to perform it, and you'll hear more from her at the end, so I won't talk too much, but you'll get to see her. You'll see what kind of performer and singer she is. She's a third-generation survivor as well, whose grandparents' story have influenced her life and her art. So she'll talk a little bit about that. But for now, you'll see her singing this song. And Jonathan, I think we just wanted to kind of set up the scene.
You want to do that for me?
No, I can do it. So basically, Anna, Lauren's playing Anna, who's the mother character, a mother in the show. And she has two daughters, Mona, who was inspired pretty directly by Vladka, and another daughter, Margalit. And Mona's kind of the wild one who's planning to go out and work with the underground. Margalit's supposed to be the good daughter, the obedient one. They both are acting up. It's a rough night. They have a fight at dinner, and both girls, Mona storms out, and then and Anna had wanted Mona to be working on the sewing to finish these dresses, and Mona didn't think that was worth doing. So she's, I have meetings, I'm getting to that. And then Margalit storms out, and Anna tries to say, well, now where are you going? And she said, I'm going to visit my perfect friend. And so she reacts. And it's hard to describe the whole scene. We don't have time to share that. But I think what Jonathan and I wanted to just convey is that things are beginning to tear, and the tension and the years. This happens, I think, about 6 months into being in the ghetto. The father in the family has gone out east and taken an offer to work out there, which we know is sort of ominous. But at the time, they're waiting to get a letter from Simon. So is that what they need to know, Jonathan, to hear the song?
I think for the main part, she's trying to keep it together, and you'll hear the song. I think it tells itself.
And Jonathan's going to talk a little bit more about the music after, but just for you to listen to the motor of the sewing machine, you can hear that in the accompaniment as it starts. So I'll let Thorin take it away. This is a new recording of Lauren Lebowitz singing the sewing song from the first act of To Paint the Earth.
Now you've lost the thread. Once you lose the thread, soon you lose your head, child. Everyone is scared, child. That's no secret. Keep the motion steady. Once you stop the movement, there's no hoping for improvement. Everyone gets restless. That's no secret. But you have a way of rushing matters through, forgetting about the thread. This house is where we work, and calmly keep our head, where we do what we have to do. You and me, the maidens three of the watchtower, and Simon, where are you? I'm doing what I can to get this family through, and though I've lost my steady hand, I guess we do what we have to do. Keep the stitches tight. If you you prick your finger and you stop, the pain will only linger. Everyone gets hurt, child, that's no secret. You might need a way of keeping things in place. We three, we don't rush or race. We sew the strings, we do the tiny things. We do what we have to do. Now you've lost the thread, child.
So thank you,
Yeah.
Lauren.
Yes. The sewing song has a lot of movement that is present throughout the whole entire show. Once it starts, it keeps on moving, and it's something that you know that follows with this theme. We keep things going. We do what we have to do is such a big theme in our show, and keeping up this sense of normalcy. Did you have something to add, Daniel, or did you want me to?
I'm reading the panel too, but I just was going to say sometimes people are curious how we wrote the song and just the process of it. And I just remember for that one, it was lyrics first, and I just wrote, once you lose the thread, soon you lose your head, or now you've lost the thread. And it was Jonathan usually never accepts lyrics that I give to him on the first time. He says, I can't hear this. How are you? You're not in any kind of form. I'm being a little harsh, but he lets me have it, and it's always good. He's usually right, which is what's frustrating. But in this case, I feel like he just took it and he's like, I can work with this, and then we got into a room and worked on it. So I just wanted to share that.
It's a very easy song to write. It wrote itself. It says what it needs to say. Not being Jewish, being raised Roman Catholic. I felt like I was faced with a very big, task. It's like, how do I write this show? And I looked at a lot of classical composers in and around Warsaw, and who were born during the time period, who grew up, and a lot of Fiddler had been written, and I wasn't going to try and do that because that was just going to be that was going to be too difficult. But what I did look at was, at the time, John Zorn had come out, and he has the Masada Quartet, and he writes a lot of, I guess, what he refers to as radical Jewish music. And so we took a lot of the themes that are in the show, we break up, and we have moments like the sewing song that are very pop-like, I guess we could say, and then we also have songs for the characters like the rabbi or the rabbi's son that are based more in more traditional, either musical theater style or a blending of, for instance, the rabbi's son Ephraim is done in a more complex meter, but it's modal. So we try to keep it interesting and use popisms or pop music, when the moment suits. But we really felt that it was important to make this as timeless as possible, and to capture as much as we could.
And I wanted to say, Jonathan, just that what Jonathan's talking about with the music is similar to the story and the words, in that, this medium, in a lot of musical theater, you do pastiche in some way and capture the music of the time period. But I think for us, it was about creating an original work of art. This isn't going to be a documentary. We never set out to do that. And I think that has been difficult over the years, because people will maybe ask Jonathan why this, is this music that could have been done, and this doesn't sound like the 40s, it doesn't sound, and some of it does if it's a little more intrinsic, and he did that research. I did the research, but then also wanted to put my writing and what I was passionate about into the story. And I think that not everyone thinks that's a great idea. Les Miserables was a big influence for me in that sort of historical fiction and the idea that it's written as a very modern show about a historical period. So I just wanted to say that what Jonathan's, I think, that balance between trying to honor the music of the period and of course, the spirit of the uprising and the events, but also tell an original musical that was something we wanted to write. We didn't set out to do a documentary, so.
We made a very strong effort to try and not show any Germans in the show. We felt that an audience member could bring a scarier German than we could ever, than we could ever bring. And we do have this moment in the piece where we reveal that the Germans have been sending out these false letters saying that everybody is okay, and the musical style that I kind of used is definitely written in very choicefully. It doesn't sound like anything else in the show. It's very much like the cabaret style, but exploded a bit. So that's a little bit of the musical background.
Yeah, and I think I want to give a shout out to Sybil Pearson at Tisch, who I think was one of the people that said, you've almost written the Germans entirely out of this show. Why not go for it and tell this all from the inside? And we tried to do that. We do have kind of some German announcements and a letter maybe at the end, but it is the Jewish police become your antagonists a lot of the times, and that was from research that the only people that the citizens of the ghetto kind of resented more than the Germans were the Ukrainians, who were doing some of the work of maintaining, and the Jewish police, and how they felt turncoats were the worst of the worst. And of course, we have people in our show who aren't necessarily Jewish police, but are making decisions for their family that might not necessarily be the best for the community. And I think it's always interesting to me and Jonathan how those characters play, and who do you side with, and who do you think made the right decision, and then who are we to judge? We're not trying to judge, we're just trying to present different stories. So I think looking at the time, I want to pivot a little bit to what's going to be the main event. I want to remind you, Michael Struss, the main event, just to say what it is going to be a video of the We Rise finale. We had 12 actors from past productions, including the London one that Thorne referenced, and long before that, performed that, and just they volunteered their time. We didn't have a producer, anything, and we're just incredibly grateful for that. So I just wanted to, and I saw someone found that Portera has a Sephardic lineage, so maybe Jonathan does have Jewish roots back there. So I want to bring back that Michael Struss, and I want to shout out to him. I think he's joining us from Tel Aviv. It's very late. We hope he's safe. I know he rested a little bit today, so he could be on with us. He's someone who we were put in touch with through another friend who worked at the Tampa Holocaust Museum, Diane Tyndall, and she said, she was put in touch with my cousin Barbara, and she said, Daniel, you have to see that there's someone who did paintings of his experience in the Warsaw Ghetto after, not during the war, but painted. And I looked at these paintings, and our show was to paint the earth, and there is Chaim, who's, other than Mona, Chaim actually is the central character, and there's a love story between them. And he's a painter kind of trying to figure out what his role is, what is the role of art in this world. And so she said, you have to talk to him. So we did connect. He was incredibly, I guess it just struck me that he knew this was a musical, he knew it was fictionalized, and he never really batted an eye. He was curious, he wanted to see the script. His daughter, Karen Struss, came to see, I think it was the New York Music Theater Festival production. And we had some correspondence over the years. I want to fast forward to 2018, which was that workshop at the Southwark Playhouse, a rehearsed reading directed by Michael Howcroft, who's a wonderful director who I think might also be on tonight. And he helped us bring the show to life in something called From Page to Stage. We wanted to get Michael to London. We didn't end up doing that, but he would call me, And he was kind of like a stage manager from afar. And he called me the night before the show. He had ideas about flags and, you know, and I was kind of saying, well, it's a staged reading. We don't have a lot of props, but I can see, you know, and he was as involved as you can be from, you know, being away. So fast forward then to the current time. And I want to sort of, introduce, Lauren had the idea to honor the 78th anniversary. She, you know, it was January, we're all in quarantine, we're in the pandemic, and a lot of artists are, you know, we're trying to find ways to keep going ourselves. And Lauren wanted to get back involved with this piece. She wanted to honor the uprising for the 78th anniversary. So she really pushed to create a Zoom video of We Rise, which is the finale number. And it's never been recorded as a video. We only have audio of it. So this is the first time we've ever done a video. Actors sent in their music, their video and audio from quarantine, from, you know, their respective places in England, all across the States. Ron Passaro became our video editor, and he worked with Jonathan on orchestrating and doing the music. And as we were talking about creating this, Lauren and Jonathan and I were talking, and we just thought, well, we need Michael in this. He should be talking about it. And as I mentioned, Michael was a worker at the Herman Brower factory. He told us about refurbishing old helmets that were recovered from the war, and he had to polish them and repair them. And as he would go out and drive a truck and bring back these old supplies and boots and helmets, he would also smuggle in weapons. And, you know, just like I was talking about with Władka, his story is incredible, and he needs his own event. And hopefully maybe that's something that could happen. We interviewed him for an hour and a half on Zoom. And I have to say it was painful to have to reduce that to what you're going to see, which is several minutes. Just, we know in this day and age, it's hard for people to, probably hard just to stay on for this Zoom, for this webinar, you know, and it's just we didn't have time to get through everything. And I think Jonathan and Lauren and I just were in awe of his story, and it's very painful to have to edit that and cut that up. And it went through every sentence is kind of precious. And I think in the end, even though I said the show, we wanted to focus on the people, we decided for Michael to use his testimony about the night of, the morning of April 19th, the early morning hours, because at 96, you know, there aren't many people who were there, and he was on the balconies watching the Germans come in, thinking that they were in for another, you know, liquidate the ghetto, another normal action, and they were surprised. And so you'll see that the clips that we focused on were of Michael talking about what it was like and the joy that it was like that evening after the Germans had been sent running from the ghetto. And that joy is, I think, a lot of what has inspired us with the piece. So let's see, I'm trying to think if there's anything else we need to say. I think that's it. Jonathan, do we need to say anything else before we have Thorin share the We Rise video?
No, I think whenever you're ready, Thorin.
Okay, so this is for the first time. Here it's being queued up. It's a new video of Michael Struss, 12 actors, so I can't name right now, but they'll all be in the credits, and just incredible. And they're from past productions of To Paint the Earth, though a few just dove in for this song, and that's incredible. And so you're going to see Michael Struss. You're going to see the new video of We Rise, which is the finale of To Paint the Earth.
Now, on April the 1943, I was, you know, on Nalewki Street. They came in. First of all, they didn't expect any resistance. They gave us a signal, and then at the same time, you know, from the balconies, maybe from 4 balconies of the Nalewki Street, they starting to shoot. And that was the most successful thing because they were ambushed. We knew about Treblinka, we knew already about Auschwitz. And from Warsaw itself, there was 400,000 people killed, sent away and so on. We had some people who came back. Are you going to die in Auschwitz or Treblinka, or are you going to die in Warsaw? You didn't think of being a hero. You were prepared to die, you understand? And you did whatever you could. The show is about people. The ghetto was people. I mean, the people were born normal, to be musicians, to be painters, to be tailors, to be shoemakers, you understand? As hard as the life was already there, you're still showing the relationship of one to the other, of the expression, how is the rabbi feeling and how is this one? Not that everybody's thinking the same way. And they had their dreams, they had their plans and so on, you know, so now it just didn't work out. You could not describe the feeling because here you were, you know, they took 400,000 people in front of your eyes on the evening. From Joy, some of the people came out from the cellars, which we haven't seen for years or months, you understand? For months, those people that were hiding, and all of a sudden from Joy, what they heard, they came out and they start, you know, congratulating us, greeting us, and giving us whatever food. And we knew it. It's a one-night stand. We knew it that tomorrow you might be gone. But you know, it was a beautiful feeling. It was a beautiful feeling that particular night.
Something now has changed. Something different this time. Fearful cries are changing to cries of war. And I'm sending out an order that you won't take us alive, that no one will deceive us anymore. Those that still remain will never walk to open graves. Those that still remain will never walk to open graves. No more fights between us, pointing at each other. No more blaming one another. We rise as one army today. Our God will rise as we go to the battlefield. The Lord is in the action that you take. Even as you face the terror, God will be your shield. My soul will go to heaven in the brilliant light of day.
Now those who remain must carry on where we cannot. Those who remain must fight them in our stead. Those who
it is impossible to put into words what we have been through. One thing is clear. What happened exceeded our boldest dreams. Twice the Germans fled our advances. The fact that we are remembered beyond the ghetto walls encourages us in our struggle. Peace go with you, my dear friend. Maybe we will see each other someday. The main thing. The dream of my life has been realized. Jewish self-defense in the Warsaw Ghetto has become a reality. I am a witness to the magnificent, heroic battle of the Jewish fighters.
As long as I can stand and punch my hand to hold a knife.
As long as I can know that Isaac made it through
As long as I can know I helped prepare the coming life.
Upon this field, not one of us survives.
Today the Warsaw Ghetto fighters come out of their hives as we rise, as we take back our life. We rise, we rise, we rise. We rise.
I know there's a lot more credits, and I realize that people need to be credited, but I'm also aware of our timing. I'd like to thank Jonathan and Daniel for leading us in and giving us all that background. I'd like to invite Daniel, Jonathan, and Lauren back onto the virtual stage here and offer an opportunity for those of you out there who have questions, and I know some have already come in, to pose your questions and to make this more interactive, and to get our panelists to respond to some of your questions and to some questions that I might have as well. But
Lauren, it says it's not letting me start my video.
okay, sorry about that. Let me see if I can fix that, Daniel. Hopefully you can get back in.
No.
Really both those video clips, Lauren, lovely performance, powerful performance for the sewing song. And I want to ask some questions, and I know our audience has some questions about that from both your perspective and from Jonathan's, but also that final video, the finale, very powerful film, powerful song. And I'll just start, if I may, because we just watched that film, it's full of the images, photographs that you were able to find, and I know those were crediting. They were rolling on the credits there at the end when I stopped the film. But can you just tell us a little about what those pictures are? Are they all from Warsaw, from the Warsaw Ghetto? Where did you find them, and how did you put those together?
Well, I'll just jump in and say that we spent hours looking at photos. And there are so many interesting places to find these photos, because some of these photos were actually taken by Germans who had visited the ghetto. There's one famous photographer that came in on his day off, decided he was just going to take some pictures of people in the Warsaw Ghetto. Other photographs come from the Stroop Report, which is a report that was written by one of the commanders, one of the Nazi commanders. He was in charge of destroying the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, and he had a group of photographers come in and take pictures of the seizing of the Warsaw Ghetto. But a lot of the other photos came from the Holocaust Museum, Yad Vashem, the Ghetto Fighters Museum, and they're photographs of people that were taken in the Warsaw Ghetto, families taken in the Warsaw Ghetto. I even included 2 photographs from my grandparents that I had in my personal collection because I felt they deserved to be there.
Well, I mean, they effectively humanize the story. And I know that our Holocaust Memorial and many other Holocaust museums try to include photographs of people because we often think of the Holocaust in terms of numbers, 6 million, which is an unbelievable number, or 400,000 in the ghetto in Warsaw. And again, these are kind of unimaginable numbers, but to remember that what we're actually talking about is people. And that's what you guys have conveyed so effectively, I think, in that short film, and I think also in the larger story, even though I haven't seen the whole play, but or whole production, but these things that I have seen really get to the personal story, which is so powerful. I know that we've had a few questions that have coming in. One is about your research, not just the research to find these photographs, which Lauren, you talked about, but asking about the larger research that you undertook. And I know, Daniel, you talked a little about this at the beginning, but somebody's asking, did you visit Warsaw? I know you met with, or you interviewed Michael, obviously. Were there other firsthand accounts that you read? Tell us a little about how you got this information.
I did end up visiting Warsaw, but later after I had written the initial draft, but it did end up influencing parts of the script. I met someone named Jan Jagielski, I think was his name, is Polish. He's non-Jewish, but he was the head at the time of the research center of the Warsaw Ghetto, of the Jewish quarter. So Jonathan, I was thinking about you, another person who wasn't Jewish, but his life's passion was sort of recording and documenting, and he took me through the Jewish quarter and showed me then, and he showed me pictures of what it looked like then. One of my takeaways, though, from being in Warsaw was actually a beautiful park, Lewensky, I'm going to forget the name of it, but there were swans, and it was outside the ghetto, and I was lying there and just, I remember feeling very emotional because for me, that's what the characters were kind of denied, the relaxation and the park and everything you would live in your life. And so sometimes for me, it kind of sneaks up on me when I feel stuff. But, you know, being in the actual ghetto, it is sort of like the Jewish quarter. It feels like also a sacred place. And then it was just lots of reading and books. I did watch other testimonials, even though Vladka's kind of ended up having such a huge impression, but other, you know, throughout the years. Lauren has a collection of books. She got me to read The Bravest Battle by Dan Kurzman, is it, Lauren? So that's about the day-by-day accounting of the fighting, which is
an hour-by-hour account.
Hour by hour. So we end on the eve of the uprising. That the song that you saw is the end. So we don't go through the hour by hour, but that was amazing to read and see how all of the stories ended or continued. Does anyone else?
And that actually raises another question, which I know people have been also talking about, which is your decision to end when you did, to have the show end with on the kind of eve of the uprising, on the about to begin the uprising. What made you decide to do that versus cover more of the fighting or talk more about the details of those battles that I think most depictions of and most accounts of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, they focus on that, but you focused on the lead up. Why was that?
Jonathan, do you want to?
I feel like we knew what was about to happen. So I think a lot of the drama and a lot of, they say the drama's in the action, but we have followed these people from the beginning of the formation of the ghetto, and we've fallen in love with them, we've learned to hate them, and we have this action, we've had different reactions, and it's that night, it's like, once you go into action, you're there. But the evening before, it's that moment of where there's just, I think, the most hope like that. I think we could capture the most life that yeah, I just think that's where the most life was.
I mean, if you think of the context of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising in the whole literature of World War II, I mean, the thing that kind of makes it different is that there was a fighting back, not the only instance, but but the largest, one of the most organized, and one of the most well documented. And so, yeah, where do you go from that? As Jonathan said, we know what happened. What happens, but I think it's a little bit too musical theater, and you want to end on a place where you feel inspired and there's a catharsis, and just as the people in the show have made peace with what's going to happen, I think the audience does too. But you don't. It'll be very hard to convey that too, and it would need a lot more time to get into the uprising of some of it. It's just, as I said, we wanted to tell the story of everything that led up to that, so it felt like a natural place to end.
There were a couple of questions that came in about the melodies that you wrote, Jonathan. One person was mentioning that the melody for the final "We Rise" is such a powerful and uplifting feeling, and another person asked about or thought that the sewing song had a kind of Sondheim sound to their ear. And so I wondered if you would say anything more. I know you talked a little about this already, but about what melodies you were going for, and if Sondheim did play into the earlier one, or if that was not the right connection to make.
I think it's hard to write anything sort of in theater where people don't hear Sondheim these days. I mean, I know Daniel will tell you, I can take any melody and be like, you know what that song is? It's this. So, I mean, the finale was meant to be anthemic, and I always say that I cheated, because it's, you build up in these sections, and then you all of a sudden, where a whole show where people have been like, we have people singing at different parts, and then they finally come together and they're big block chords, that it does something to somebody. There wasn't anybody I particularly I pulled from stylistically. Like I said, there was a lot of classical influence, but I wish I could say it was intentional, but I've been called worse things.
Absolutely.
And
I wanted to get to one other thing that you I think Daniel and Jonathan, you were talking about, which is about finishing with on the eve of the uprising and the hope that you were able to capture at that moment. And I think I've heard you, Lauren, either write or say things about how this show has a different feeling, a different take than a lot of Holocaust accounts. And it is that more hopeful sound that we hear. And I wondered if you could just say a little about why you wanted to go that route, or why hope was important to you, or what you were trying to capture as the kind of big feeling that people will have leaving this show. I'm not sure who to direct it to. Any?
Lauren, do you want to?
Well, I think it's a writer's question.
Yeah, I mean, what I was, as you were talking, and that hope, I was thinking about the letter, which people saw there's an instrumental section, and we included this letter from Mordecai and Levowitz, who was the leader, the commander. He had very minimal training from Hashomer Hatzair, from the youth group, and he said the goal, and Simon Oskarsson, I think I'm going to mispronounce that. He's a Swedish actor. He portrayed him in that film, reading that letter, which was written to Yitzhak Zuckerman, who was on the other side. And he said, the dream of my life has been realized. I have lived to see Jewish resistance in the Warsaw Ghetto. And I think that hopefulness did factor into To Paint the Earth. I was talking to Jonathan. I felt like it gave us permission, if this commander, who didn't have many more days in there, and knew that, and if he said that this was the greatest feeling of my life, then I thought we also had permission to celebrate. And I think when Michael Struss talks about the people bringing food out to the, all of that, I think, that it does make To Paint the Earth a little different. And we don't want to gloss over what happened. It's just where you emphasize and what the theme is. So I think that did help us in the writing.
And I think what's so amazing is that we leave the show knowing that these people, they were going to stand up for themselves and for their lives and for their freedom, and they were going to decide how they died. They knew that this was probably a suicide mission, and for most people it was. But they were going to. There's a line from the show that I love that always gives me the chills, and it's "Show the world how a people fought." And I think that's really important, especially now that these people stood up for what they believed, that they weren't going to go quietly to their deaths anymore.
Absolutely, and an important message to get across. I think it's all too often the case that we see depictions of the victims of the Holocaust and think of them as passive, when we know that not only in Warsaw, this was, as you said, the largest uprising, but there were hundreds of uprisings, and there were all kinds of ways that people rebelled and resisted, just as you, Daniel, you started when we started talking. We've only got a few minutes left. I want to come back to Michael Struss and ask you about that, but before we go any further, a number of people are chiming in, asking about what's the future here? How do we get the word out? When is this going to appear in some other full version? What's your future here? What do you want? How can people help?
That's a great question. You can definitely, Lauren's helped work on our new website, so topainttheearth.com. You can go to, and we're on the social Instagram. You can follow us, and she's really creating a beautiful visual there. We are looking at the 80th anniversary, so in 2 years, and what that could be. It's just we kind of see where the show goes. We've talked a little bit about doing something in Warsaw or Tel Aviv even, and that one Michael Struss could attend and see it. And we just kind of keep looking for what is the next venue. I think someone in the panel wrote, "Are you going to do it all virtually and create?" And I think Lauren and Jonathan and I mean, it was not easy. We definitely had our fights, but it did translate very beautifully to, but I mean, that might sound, I don't know. I thought Lauren, and did this producing job that just made it an incredible video to watch. So we have talked a little bit about, well, maybe we should do this with more of the songs. There are a lot of other songs, and maybe create some more video that way. But ultimately, I mean, we do want to have this on a big stage and seen live, and as it should be experienced, and whether that's in London or New York or anywhere else, we just kind of keep looking and keeping our eyes open and talking with producers.
And do friend us on Facebook so that we can find you and ask you for money later. And let you know what's going on, and so we can keep you involved.
So out there, people, you can help spread the word about this show and the fact that it exists and that it's trying to get more airplay. And of course, money always helps for every project. So no doubt about that. And
this video will be on that Facebook page. We wanted to wait till you guys were the first to see it, but it will be on the website. So that's a great place to start as an introduction. And they get Michael, to boot. And I saw someone reference Ruth Hendel, who is a friend of the show, and she's nurtured us from when she saw the first reading of this. She's a producer, and she saw the initial reading at NYU. So she's been guiding us and helped us a lot of the way. So she's been a wonderful friend of the show.
Well, I will say, as a kind of viewer, I found the finale in this virtual format very powerful and effective, but at the same time, I would love to see it on stage and in person, although that's a dream for everybody right now. I want to come back just in our last few moments here to talk about, people have asked more about Michael Struss. How did you connect with him? I think you touched on it a little, but maybe you could tell us a little more. And how has he fed into your creative process or into you understanding this event, the uprising itself?
When we had our Zoom call with Michael Struss, I think we were all so inspired by everything he had to say. And it just made us want to do this video and get this out there and tell his story, because it is so important.
Sorry, Lauren.
No, you could go ahead. I just
Michael-
remember getting off that call and we were all blown away.
You know, he said the show is about the people, and I think if someone who was in the fighting and there for the uprising, you know, he was fighting from the rooftops, but he also, I think, had this passion that we should tell about shoemakers and tailors and rabbis and the sun and how everyone has a different perspective, and that started to really work its way into the script, I think, more even earlier when I talked to Michael. Also, he talked about what the Polish people were doing on the Polish side and making sure that, you know, there were Polish brethren that were helping to sneak people out of the ghetto. And he has this very broad perspective of people that were doing what they needed to do. So I think he's been a real guiding force.
Well, we're out of time. I want to thank Jonathan Portera, Daniel Levin, and Lauren Lebowitz for coming on and doing this and sharing their work with us, and in the kind of larger frame of putting this story into a Broadway or a theatrical musical that can tell the story to a broader audience. I think it's really a powerful one. I also want to again thank my colleagues and my partner organizations at the Cuthbert Center and the Holocaust Center in White Plains for joining us for this program. And I hope that everybody will go and take a look at our various organizational websites and support our educational missions. Thanks, everybody. Have a lovely evening. Appreciate you all joining us.
Mm-hmm.